Hey, welcome to Docs on Docs, the podcast that asks real doctors to rate or recommend a television documentary that they have recently watched.
Les, you could say it's just what the doctor ordered.
I am your host, Les Jebson, along with my childhood friend and colleague, Brian Wolfdog Murray. And
Yes.
we are here with you today. The background on this is that, again, both of us work in healthcare administration. We interact with physicians all the time. And we started this sort of conversation of sharing interesting documentaries, probably goes all the way back to the pandemic and Tiger King. And so when we were visiting docs in the doctor's lounge, they would say, hey, give me a good documentary that I need to watch when I've got a few minutes spare. And that's what's manifested into this fun and informal podcast that you're with us here today on. So let me, without further ado, introduce you to this week's guest, and that is Dr. DJ Kennedy, who is the chair of physical medicine and rehabilitation at Vanderbilt University. And yes, it is DJ.
Happy to
And
be
all the
here.
latest music.
All the
Yeah.
latest music. Yes, apart from being a world-renowned DJ, he is obviously a practicing physiatrist at a schleppy institution like Vanderbilt, but we let him on the show today. So good to have you aboard with us.
Pleasure to be here. Should be fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Dr. Kennedy, welcome to the Doctor's Lounge and Docs on Docs. It's great to have you here. Really, we wanted to just have you kind of open up and just kind of let us know what documentary you selected and why you selected it.
Yeah, I actually had a hard time choosing. There's a lot of really good ones out. I mean, you mentioned Tiger King, where, the least interesting character is a multi-limb loss transvestite is the least interesting character. I do like Terminator as one of the all-time greatest. Obviously, just a great one. But today we're going to be discussing Sour Grapes, which I think fits more in the categories of what you're looking for.
You bet. Yep. Brian, do you want to give him a little background on sour grapes, or you want me to get it? Either one?
No, no question. Sour Grapes, a 2016 documentary. You can still watch it on Netflix right now. To give a little background, it is about a wine fraudster and con man known as Rudy Karniawan. So if you can say that name a few times fast just to get it down, he is an Indonesian born. Uh, he was never actually, I don't believe, a citizen of the United States, but someone who entered the United States, stayed illegally, and actually put together the largest wine fraud in history. And I believe the highest count they heard for the fraudulent bottles he produced was about 15,000. I think they say that potentially about 10,000 are still in circulation. And kind of where everything came to a peak or a head was when I think it was Bill Koch, the billionaire,
Coke
essentially had
Industries. Coke
yeah, of
Industries.
Koch
Yep.
Industries, correct.
Yep.
Picked up a bottle or some bottles of fake bottles from Thomas Jefferson, like a Chateau Lafite from 1787. And I got to tell you, you probably don't want to upset a billionaire, or I think you may
He
want to start
had
coming after you.
$4 million in recognized fake wine that he had purchased.
Yes,
$4 million
yes.
dollars in clear fake wine that he had purchased.
And I think the documentary, give or take, was about 85, 90 minutes, about an hour and a half long. And I will say personally, as a wine aficionado, I might have to, I hope I skew my ratings at the end accurately because I am also a fan of wine, but we can kind of discuss that a little bit later. Dr. Kennedy, what is your kind of take on the documentary as a whole and some of the highlights that you had kind of noted?
Yeah, there were a few things. I picked it because, I like wine, right? A lot of doctors like wine. At the beginning of the pandemic, you were drinking more and more wine, at least I was. And neat party trick, you could tell what kind of wine you were drinking, and here, try this, and you could do it. And got into what I was considering expensive wines, right? Um, maybe $100, maybe 200, really special occasion, 350 or $400 for a really truly special occasion wine.
Yeah.
And you realize there's this whole other world, and you're like, I'm okay with it, but you get I mean, this documentary talks about $20,000 bottles, $100,000 bottles. Like the $20,000 bottles are like no big deal. $10,000 bottles. It's just a whole other level to it. And, I mean, he had one wine cell where he sold $35 million of estimated, $35 million sold, and a good chunk of it's estimated to be fraudulent. So it was fascinating to watch, and that's what picked it up from that perspective.
Yeah, Coke, well, the Koch brothers, Koch Industries. And he's like, I discovered looking through my wine cellar that as much as 75% of it was fake, right? And this guy, Rudy, is obviously insane talent. I mean, absolutely insane talent. And
Well,
he's
no.
he's basically mixing wines to the point where even aficionados can't tell the difference, right? And he's with these stockbrokers and cracking $5,000 and $10,000 bottles. He's taking the bottles, he's taking the seals off the bottles, taking them with him. And then he's in his house in some nondescript home in California. He's putting together exact replicas, if you will, of these really uber expensive wines and taking everybody to the cleaners. And then all of a sudden, someone's having a party and says, he meets his match with a master sommelier, right? And the sommelier says, "Hey, I got to be honest with you, this is not Chateau Lafite. No disrespect, but," and you're like, "Who calls somebody out at a party like that and says you don't have the real thing?" Right? So, absolutely, it is. Again, we'll get into the ratings here in a second with Dr. Kennedy's, but here's a fun question for you, DJ. Is you get a chance to go to dinner with Rudy? Do you go to dinner with him and what do you get some wine? What do you do? Or
Oh,
you're like, nah, I have
hands
no
down.
desire to meet this guy.
So this is a guy that, I mean, there are people that really, and I'm a novice and can definitely tell you the difference between a white and a red when I'm tasting a blind. But, I mean, there are people that really, I mean, the sommelier, the exams where people have to be able to tell what region it's from, I mean, all kinds of things. And there are people that can. And he was able to fool these people. He was repeatedly able to go to wine tastings and tell you exactly what he's drinking just by tasting it blind, right? Could tell you exactly what's going on. So he has an incredible palate from everything and able to recreate these things. So the funny thing is, and I actually was thinking about like, where would I go to lunch or dinner with this guy? And what I would love is for him just to make something and say, go. And the craziest thing is after 10 years in prison, he's back in Singapore and evidently doing this as a high-end party trick.
Great lead in. Great lead in.
That's what he's
Br-
doing.
Yeah,
So
Brian
Singapore
and I
has
were
some
talking about this. You can now,
world
yeah, you can rent him for your
world-class
private
restaurant.
party.
Pick and go and let him do it. And I bet I would learn a ton.
I know. I read that too. When we were doing research for the podcast here, we're like, this guy's out. And then he's involved in his family's involved in some $750 million Indonesian heist. I
Thanks.
mean,
Bank
it is
Heist.
just the turns this was
Oh,
an absolutely fantastic podcast. There's no doubt about
not
it.
only did he fake the wines, he probably, by the amount of money he was pouring into it, single-handedly drove up the wine market. So he was buying them at auctions. And even if he would have been legitimate, the amount of money he put into it and the time he put into it drove it up when stock markets were going crazy. He probably could have stayed legitimate and flipped and still made millions, right?
Yep.
Just in the legitimate wine business by driving that market alone. Not to mention the fraudulent stuff, which is just fascinating.
I agree. I agree with you. So, at any point in your career after watching this, do you stay being a doctor, or would you be a master sommelier like Rudy? And any temptation to pursue that lifestyle? Just speaking for me, I would. I'd love to be able to have that talent. I wouldn't use it like he used it, but
Right.
I'd love to be able to have that talent of being able to literally give me a bottle blind and I can tell you everything about the provenance and lineage of that bottle, right? I mean, just what a gift. So, anyways, would you be a
I grew up on
sommelier?
a farm, so
Okay.
and in the country, and I have an affinity for growing things and building things and doing that way. So, and I love bourbon and love wine. And the fact of, thinking about aging things, the fact of how are you selecting the grapes? How are you putting it in a barrel? That I would like to do. You always, my wife and I will play the what if we won the lottery game, and
What
I
would you
would
do?
keep my job, but I would love to have a vineyard, probably also doing some bourbon, probably
Yeah.
mix and match that because that's two fun things to do. But I would enjoy that quite a bit.
Not to take us off on a tangent, but add Pappygate to your documentaries to watch. And if you have seen it, save it, and we'll review it on a future
Yep.
podcast. Um,
100%.
Indeed. So where is Rudy now? Do we know? Is
He is
he
in
it
Singapore, correct?
is it, yeah, I was looking at the notes. If he so he stayed over in that part. Yeah, he's deported. He was
He
deported
was
to Indonesia.
deported after
Eh,
10 years in prison. He was
Yep.
deported.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a real fascinating lesson here for doctors. So in my mind,
Yep.
doctors, we spend a lot of time becoming experts. We really do spend a lot of time becoming experts and learning this body of knowledge and patients place a lot of faith in us as experts. And we all know there are good doctors and bad doctors and a few even fraudulent people out there. But there is this as a career, we have this faith. And you start to get into this high level stuff. People have a faith in these names. So people place their faith in him. People place faith in Bernie Madoff, right? And it just goes to show that that alone, you could know so much about wine. You could know that the 1945 vintage is the one to get, all of these things. But what really blew it out of the water for him was the winemaker saying, "Hey, we actually didn't make that wine in this year." Right?
Right.
Or
Right.
you're auctioning off more wine cases than were actually made that year,
That's right.
right?
Rudy was found to be offering more magnums of the limited edition 1947 Chateau Le Fleur than had ever been produced, and his
Right.
Clos Saint Denis Grand Cru was labeled completely fictitious
Yeah.
vintage. And of course, he gets 10 years of imprisonment in the United States, and then he's kicked out, sent back. And now, if you're anywhere in Singapore, you can rent Rudy for party tricks
I mean, he did
at your
wire a
leisure.
$17 million check to his family back in Singapore. The funny thing about it was the lawyers. The lawyer saying, one of the lawyers goes, "Well, let's just assume everything's right. We'll just assume that's all right. We're just talking wine here." No, you're talking $35 million of wine in one sale, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Grand Theft Auto doesn't even come close. I mean, that's one sale, not to mention the 10 million he sold before that. Um, and they're like, well, or it'd be hard for him to do all this stuff by himself, right? Even though the amount of evidence was amazing. I mean, they found wine remaking. They found, thousands of dollars in wax that he'd bought to do it, and
Labels
labels
and all
and
the
old
kits in his
paper, and
house. And
all in
yeah,
his house when they raided it. And then yeah, the twist was the tie-in to the family of stealing $750 million from banks.
I know.
And, like what, because how do you get this money to even start? I mean, he was legitimately buying legitimate wines because he was probably taking them home, tasting them, and trying to recreate them, or drinking them and then rebottling them, which is just
It's not a
nuts.
bad job. Not a bad job. I know. Indeed. Brian, thoughts on the ratings? What did the ratings show us on Sour Grapes? Now, this is obviously a 9-year-old documentary at this point. It's still on Netflix. It's also on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube, and so
Yep.
it goes down as one of my favorites of all time. It's definitely my top 5 documentaries of all time.
Same. Last great point. Um, I know that I traditionally have a pretty strict way that I have kind of rated our documentaries. I will also say probably one of my top five favorite. If you look at Rotten Tomatoes, they gave this documentary an average score of 96, so incredibly strong, incredibly high.
Yep.
I'm sorry, IDMB rankings around 7.2 out of 10, and 66% of Google users liked it. I obviously kind of stick with the Rotten Tomatoes, as that one being kind of the more of an expert opinion, or maybe a more valid opinion when it comes to us rating these documentaries. So I
Yep.
hope everyone's sitting down, knowing my history and all that. And I have
Yep.
tried to skew this for me even though I enjoy the content and I had a personal interest in it, I wanted to be as impartial as possible. But
Okay.
I genuinely would give this one a 90 to a 95. So let's average it, and I put it in 92.5.
Okay. So 1 out of 10, are you giving it a 9.2?
9.2, correct.
9.2 on the 10 scale. Okay.
Yep.
Dr. Kennedy, on a 1 to 10,
All right.
and also your overall rankings of all time, where are you putting sour grapes?
So this is a tough one, and it's a spectacular documentary. And when it really is, it's well done. It captures, video from the contemporary video. It does a really fair picture of it. If you're a wine lover or a fine art connoisseur or anything in that genre that you really are like that, I'm into this and want to see, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10 on that 10-point scale.
Boom.
Solid.
However,
Okay.
however, if if you are not into these things that are way beyond the price point of doctors, right? I mean, they're really, I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
true, you know, fine art. And I'm not trying to discount, but if you're like, I'm a Bud Light guy and, no art, nothing like that,
Yeah.
I'm going to knock it down to like a 6, right? Because you're going to look at it and say, these people are all stupid. And, there were some hoity-toity people that will annoy you in it.
Agreed.
So I'm going to average it out, thinking, among doctors,
For the
right?
common man like Brian, yes.
Yeah, accomplished, but not, I mean, somewhere in that range. I'm gonna give it 7.5, 8.
Okay.
Overall, and that's
Right.
a population based,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
A lot of science goes into that scoring.
yeah,
That's
Hey,
yeah,
I love it. I
that's
love
the
it.
academic in me. I can't just give
that's
you
some
one score,
that's
right?
some cerebral stuff right there.
Yeah,
There's
it's as
no
high as
doubt
I
about
I
get.
it.
love it.
Well, colleagues and friends, thanks for joining us. Remember, ring that bell and subscribe if you have any interest whatsoever in wasting your time. I mean, sorry, watching more of our documentaries reviews with real doctors. And if you end up watching a documentary such as Sour Grapes and you have some strong opinions on it, be sure to share those with us. And want to thank Dr. Kennedy very much. Thank you, DJ, for taking time, all seriousness, taking time out of your busy schedule to be with Brian and I. And we'll make sure that there's a link to Sour Grapes down below. And Brian, as we famously say, we'll see you
Yes.
next time
Next time on
on
Docs
Docs
on
on
Docs.
Docs.